Shema Yisrael, Yahu Eloheinu, Yahu Echad. Baruch Shem Kebod Malkotho Leholam Voed.
Shalom, everyone. I am the Chief Magician of Mystery Babylon, and welcome to my holy channel. This will be a podcast, so you don't have to look at the screen. I'm not going to bring forth any citations. You can just sit back and listen and learn. So, I'm going to be speaking about some occult mysteries of HaMashiach ben Yosef. So, we have many Kabbalistic texts that deal and speak on HaMashiach ben Yosef and attempt to speak on the mysteries behind HaMashiach ben Yosef. There's quite a number of Kabbalistic texts. And it's very unfortunate because what we have is that practically all of the Jews, all of the religious Jews, they are spiritually blind to the true holy mysteries behind HaMashiach ben Yosef. Now, there are some Kabbalistic texts that do reveal some actual, true, very high holy mysteries of HaMashiach ben Yosef, even within the Lurianic texts. But nevertheless, the facts are that most religious Jews never fully penetrate these sections within these texts. And it's really, really unfortunate. It's all due to spiritual blindness. And as I've said in previous videos, the effects of spiritual blindness is to make one stupid and even sometimes make somebody retarded. These are just the facts. And so I'm going to show you how simple some of these mysteries really are. And they're all just hidden right there in full-blown plain sight. Very, very simple. I mean, it doesn't take a grandmaster, it doesn't take a master, it doesn't take a Rob to see and understand all of this. It's also simple, a young child can easily see and understand what I'm going to reveal in this video, and yet it's been hidden and a cult from all Jews and all of Judaism for the past 2,000 years, which is, really, really sad. I have to say that, of all of the Kabbalistic texts that I've read, I think the text that got the closest to some of the deepest mysteries of HaMashiach ben Yosef are Chaim Vital's texts. And there's one text in one gate, I believe it's, I think it's in Sefer Likutim. In his Sefer Likutim, there's a small section where he starts to talk about some of these very deep holy mysteries of HaMashiach ben Yosef. He starts saying things like, if I remember correctly, he says things like, the Jews and the Israelites would reject HaMashiach ben Yosef, and that he would be killed, and all these things that are very Christian-like. I mean, if you read this section, it almost sounds like a Christian talking about Jesus, and I remember reading this text, I'm like, wow, Chaim Vital here is really, really, opening up, the mystery here, and I'm like, why, I mean, it's also, to me as a grandmaster, it's obviously so obvious, right? But to most Jews reading this book, I'm sure everything he's saying about HaMashiach ben Yosef is completely going over their head, And the reality is that most of the mysteries that are revealed in the most advanced esoteric Kabbalistic texts are also going over the heads of most Jews and Kabbalists. This is just the truth of the matter. I'm always putting down the vast majority of spiritual and religious Jews because the vast majority of them are spiritually deficient, spiritually blind, and it's all just really, really sad. But it is what it is. That's just the way things are, I guess. So I'm gonna just start peeling the layers here. Very, very simple layers, right? So, if we want to understand very simply the holy mysteries behind Mashiach ben Yosef, right? We have to go back to the narrative of Yosef in the Torah and analyze it and read it. And then everything is right there, hidden in plain sight. It's also simple, right? So let's just break down the very basics, right? Yosef represents Mashiach ben Yosef, right? It's as basic as it gets, right? He's the archetype. And we see that his brothers, right, are jealous of him. They don't like him. And I believe it's Yehuda who comes up with the plot to have him killed. And they attempt to kill him. And they throw him in a pit. And then they go back to the father and tell him, yeah, Yosef is dead. And then Yosef gets sold as a slave in Egypt. And then in Egypt, he goes from being a slave to being imprisoned to then becoming the vice lord of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. Right? So if we break this down very simply, right? Here we have that the principal antagonist, right, is Yehuda and his brothers, right? Which would quintessentially represent the Jews, right? So what we have here is that we have Yehuda, right? It's principally Yehuda who's the mastermind behind this plot to have Yosef, his brother, killed, along with his other brothers, who would represent some of the other tribes, right? Because Beit Yehuda is not just strictly the tribe of Yehuda, it also encompasses a few other tribes. So what do we learn? Well, already we can understand from this that one of the mysteries that pertains to Mashiach ben Yosef is that, right, his own people, his own family is going to end up rejecting him, right? So if we're looking for a candidate of Mashiach ben Yosef, right, when we are accepting Mashiach ben Yosef, one of the things that we should expect is that we should expect that a large majority of Israel, of Jews, are going to have to reject him and even want him killed, right? So when we're talking about Mashiach ben Yosef, the mystery, and it's so simple, right? I mean, this is also simple, just from the story, just from the simple narrative. It's so simple, right? When we're going to identify Mashiach ben Yosef, he has to be an Israelite. He has to be a Jew that the majority of Jews and Israelites are going to want to kill and are going to hate. This is the first principal condition that if we're going to call anyone Mashiach ben Yosef, right, has to meet this critical condition. Okay. Now, second condition, right, is that Yosef becomes the vice lord of Egypt. So what we see then, right, Egypt, we have to understand that Kabbalistically, Telestically, Egypt and Pharaoh have a negative connotation, right? Egypt quintessentially represents the Sitra Achra. Pharaoh represents the Sitra Achra, right? Very deep in the Kabbalah, right? You will learn to understand the symbols that Egypt and Pharaoh have a spiritually negative connotation. Okay? And we have to understand that in the generation of Yosef, Egypt was a superpower. It was the world's first and foremost superpower. So think of America, right? In our generation, America is, for the most part, likened to being the great first and foremost superpower of the world, right? And most Americans, generally speaking, are of white European ancestry, right? But not every American is of white European ancestry, right? We have Chinese, we have Indians, right? To a large extent, America is a very diverse nation, and that comes when a superpower becomes global and very, when a nation becomes a superpower and a global superpower at that, right? They become diverse, in terms of their people, right? We could see that with the ancient kingdoms, Persia, Rome, right? Many other people from other nations flock to the global superpower, and then it becomes a diverse, nation, so to speak. And so it was the same thing with Egypt in the generation of Yosef, right? Not everyone in Egypt was Egyptian, right? You had people from all other from other nations around the world that came to Egypt, right? Because they're the global superpower. So think of ancient Egypt in the generation of Yosef, just like modern day America, so to speak, in terms of its makeup. So what we have then is that Egypt, right, is can come to represent the Goyim, right? Egypt now is housing the Goyim, right? That's what it comes to represent. Egypt has the Goyim, is the Goyim. So what we have then is that, you have Yosef's brothers that wanted to kill him and that hate him. And then when Yosef becomes the vice lord of Egypt, they don't end up recognizing who he is, right? So they thought that they had killed him and gotten rid of him. Then he becomes vice lord, and they come to Egypt and they don't recognize their own brother. They don't recognize that the vice lord of Egypt is their own brother, is their own flesh and blood. They don't know it. They don't recognize him. But all of the Goyim, they know and they recognize the vice lord of Egypt, right? All of the Goyim in Egypt, they know who the vice lord of Egypt is, and they know they have to submit to the vice lord of Egypt. They also know who Pharaoh is. So hopefully now you can begin to see the parallels to Yeshua and Christianity, right? Because we have, right, the Jews hated Jesus. They wanted Jesus killed. The vast majority of Jews, especially the elite Sanhedrin and the ruling elite of Israel in his generation, they wanted him killed. They hated him. There's a lot of Jews, and especially elite Jews, the leading Jews in this generation, wanted Jesus killed, and they hated him, right? And then what happened? Jesus became the Messiah. He became very famous, and he became the Messiah to all of the Goyim. And then 2,000 years later, the Jews, they don't know who Jesus is. They don't recognize him. So Jesus is the Messiah, and all of the Goyim worship him and know who he is. And he's also the Messiah to the Jews. But the Jews, they don't know who Jesus is, and they don't really recognize who Jesus really is. They don't know that he's Jewish. The vast majority of Jews for the past 2,000 years, because they live in such insular environments, they don't even know that Jesus is Jewish, but it comes from them. The vast majority of Jews for the past 2,000 years think and believe that Jesus is like some Greek pagan god, some Roman pagan god. You'll be surprised to find out how many Jews do not know that Jesus is Jewish, that he was a Kabbalist of the highest order. Most Jews don't know this, believe it or not, as shocking as it may sound to some of you. Now, again, understand that all of the Goyim in Egypt, they recognized and knew who Yosef was, who the vice lord of Egypt is. He's the second in command, and Pharaoh is first in command. So Pharaoh, then, we can say, represents, the Christians will tell you that Pharaoh represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so we can see this now, right? that when we have Mashiach ben Yosef, we have these two conditions, right? The conditions are that his own family, his own blood, his own family and his own blood, which are the Jews, hate him and want him killed. And then he becomes the vice lord to Egypt, and all of the Goyim worship him and serve him. So what happens, right? If we analyze the first condition, that we're looking for a candidate where the Jews are going to hate and want him killed, the next condition then is that all of the Goyim are going to want to worship him and raise him very, very high. So these are the two conditions now. When we're looking for our Mashiach ben Yosef, we have to find a candidate where all of the Jews are going to hate him, or at least the majority of Jews and Israelites are going to hate him and want him killed. And then after they try to have him killed, we're going to see that all of the Goyim are going to worship him and elevate him to godlike status. Now, if we go back in our history, there's only one man that matches all of those conditions, and that's Jesus. Because we see that in his generation, almost all of Israel hated him and wanted him killed. And after they tried to kill him, we see that all of the Goyim, he became vice lord of the whole earth. He literally became the vice lord of our entire construct as the Mashiach. And what we see then is that all of the Goyim start worshiping him and serving him. Because it's after Yosef's brothers try to have him killed, right? He goes through all of these levels until he becomes the vice lord of Egypt. So we see after the Jews tried and wanted to have Jesus killed, Jesus then rises to sit at the right hand of Adonai. And then once he sits at the right hand of Adonai, all of the Goyim, they're like, oh, Jesus is the vice lord of this construct of our world, and they all worship him and serve him. We're talking nations here. We have over a billion Christians. We've had over 1 billion Christians in the past 2,000 years. Okay? Most of the world recognizing who Jesus is. The whole world, Muslims, to a large extent, recognize and know who Jesus is. The Christians know who Jesus is. They're like, this guy is the vice lord of this world. He's second only to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is represented by Pharaoh. So like I said, there's only one man that meets these conditions, and that's Jesus. This is so simple, right? Everything that I just told you right now, it's all hidden in plain sight. It's right there underneath the text. It's so simple. It's like so simple. Like, you don't need to be a grandmaster. You don't need to be a master. You don't need to be this well-studied rabbi, okay, to know this. But again, that's what spiritual blindness does. It makes you retarded. It makes you stupid. Which is what and the whole world sees this. The whole world, right, is looking at the Jews and like, they're the only ones that don't get it, that don't see it. Now, let us go in there, because see, the next problem I want to bring up, right? What I've done here now is I've exposed the spiritual blindness and the stupidity of the vast majority of Jews. That's what I've done. Now I'm going to transition, and I want to expose the stupidity and ignorance of the Christians. It's a two-way street here. Now, the Christians, as I said, they will correctly tell you that, okay, Yosef represents HaMashiach, and Pharaoh represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. We can say that's correct. But the divine well here goes very, very deep. Because I'm going to reveal now some very, very secret mysteries. we have to answer the question is, what is the root? What is the divine root and source of the Mashiach? This is a very, very deep, profound question that is only fully answered at the highest levels of the esoteric Kabbalah, right? I'm talking about Shabbatain texts like Treatise of Dragons, okay? It takes many, many years of holy initiation to be able to fully answer that question. So I'm going to grossly oversimplify the matter here, right? Is this divine root and source, is it chesed or is it geburah? This is a very complex question, and the answer is very complex. I can't fully get into it here because most of you are not advanced enough to fully understand the matter. Suffice it to say, I've presented a dichotomy because there's a dichotomy at play here. On one level, we learn in the Kabbalah that silver represents chesed. There's a verse in the Torah, in Bereshit, that states that at one point Yosef gathered all the silver in the land, which means he's gathering all the chesed. Now the Lurianic texts go very, very deep into this, and it's far beyond the canon scope of this video. But Yosef gathers all the silver in the land, meaning that he's gathering a lot of chesed, right? And so from this aspect, right, we can come to understand how Yeshua is so often associated with chesed, right? But this is the same Mashiach that explicitly said that he came to put a sword on earth, which is geburah. And the Synoptic Gospels themselves tell us explicitly that Mashiach ben Yosef is sitting at the right hand. Now, you have to ask yourself, is the right associated with geburah or chesed? Now, you have to understand something very momentous here. Over 97% of Kabbalists can't fully and properly answer that question. There's a very, very, very deep, profound matter at play here that I'm not going to reveal. Now, as I stated earlier, Pharaoh has a spiritually negative connotation, right? So you have to understand the implications and ramifications of equating Pharaoh with Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So I'm going to first bring up a verse from the Torah. In Bereshit, it states that Yosef had a dream, and he saw the sun and the moon and 11 stars prostrate to him, essentially worshiping him. Now, it doesn't say 10 stars. It says 11 stars. If you're highly initiated, you know that these 11 stars are entirely in the mystery of HaKlipoth. And the sun and the moon are the male and female gods presiding over the Klipoth, which would be Samael and Lilith. So what we see here is that we see how elevated and sublime Mashiach ben Yosef is, because what the Torah is telling us very mystically and occultly is that Mashiach ben Yosef rules the entire Sitra Achra. Right? If you're going to be the most powerful black magician, right, you have to be connected to Mashiach ben Yosef. Because if you're the most powerful black magician and you're connected to Samael and Lilith, Well, there's still one power. There's still one power higher than that. So you haven't reached the highest level. Who do you think runs the world? But I'm getting to matters now that most of you are unaware of. So the implications and the ramifications of equating Pharaoh with Hakadosh Baruch Hu are very, very massive, right? Because the Christians, they say that they worship the Father and the Son. But the Christians are very, very ignorant, right? They're not Jewish Kabbalists. They're not grandmasters. They're likened to foolish babies. Most of them are goyim, after all. So the Christians say that we worship the Father and the Son. Well, the Father is Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the Son is HaMashiah. Okay, but let's go back to the narrative, because the narrative is revealing to us very deep Kabbalistic truths. The goyim, they know and recognize who Yosef is as HaMashiach. And they certainly know and recognize who Pharaoh is. But remember, Pharaoh is not the father of Yosef. And I've already stated that Pharaoh has a spiritually negative connotation. We can liken Pharaoh to the true demiurge. The true archetypal demiurge here. And I'm not talking about Lucifer. Although Lucifer is a demiurge. So this then informs us that the Christians, as I've always stated and I've proven, they don't know who God really is. And they don't fully understand who and what they think they are worshiping. Because Pharaoh is not the good guy here. But what they're saying is they're worshiping Pharaoh. Essentially, most Christians are worshiping Pharaoh without knowing it. Because the text informs us that the Goyim, they served and they worshiped Yosef alongside Pharaoh. Because Mashiach ben Yosef is very much linked to this higher divine entity. The question is, who is this higher divine entity that is being represented by Pharaoh? Now, unless you are initiated at the highest levels, you won't know, you won't understand. And I guarantee you over 90%, if not 99% of you listening won't be able to answer me that question. What divine entity does Pharaoh represent at play here? Because Pharaoh is not the father of Yosef, it's Yaakov. Yaakov is the hidden God at play here that isn't being worshipped by the Goyim, and who the Goyim do not know because they are uninitiated. Right? Who you worship and how you worship very much affects the construct at play. So if you can begin to understand what I have revealed here very Kabbalistically, and can begin to understand the theological implications and ramifications, then you can actually get somewhere. And that is good. right? So there's all these esoteric hidden levels at play that the Christians completely miss, and it goes all over. It goes way over their head. They can't see it. They can't understand. They're too spiritually and intellectually deficient to be able to get to this level of understanding. Now again, I can't fully reveal the matter because I know for a fact that the vast majority of you listening are not at the requisite levels to be able to be fully taught these esoteric levels. But I've given you hints. I've given you enough. So, shalom, wassalam.